Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we will be recapping the story, The Tainted Half. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot. A long time ago, in the small eastern nation of Tiso, a heavenly maiden descended to the land and fell in love with a mortal man. Their children, inheriting their mother's celestial beauty, lived among humans and became known as the Yul people. However, their extraordinary beauty turned out to be more of a curse than a blessing. Jealous and greedy humans ravaged their community, causing their numbers to decrease drastically. This fate befell even the last surviving daughter of the Yul, who was summoned to serve the emperor's whims. Fast forward to the present, the emperor is lounging with a woman, all smiles. When she asks why he's in such a good mood, he reveals that he's eagerly awaiting someone special that night. Just then, a servant enters to announce that the Yul girl has arrived. The emperor leaps up, ordering the woman to leave. However, the servant hints at a problem, but the emperor is just thrilled that the Yul girl is finally here. As the girl walks in, the emperor's smile vanishes. His anger flares when he sees her face, marred by a scar. The servant explains that the girl's mother, enraged by the emperor's command, disfigured her daughter's face. Trembling, the girl begs for mercy on her mother's behalf, but the emperor laughs cruelly. He orders the servant to execute her and bring him another Yul girl. In fact, he demands all the Yul women, especially the girl's mother. Shockingly, the servant reveals that she is the last of the Yul, as the rest of her people took their own lives after she was taken. The girl, stunned by this news, asks if her mother is really gone, but the servant warns her to keep quiet in the emperor's presence. Meanwhile, the other woman is still in the room. The emperor, enraged that she disobeyed his order to leave, grabs a sword and executes her on the spot. He then tells the servant, his chief eunuch, to search for any surviving Yul people, but to keep the girl alive until then. And so begins the tragic tale of the last Yul. 10 years later, that girl, now known as concubine Seolha, still lives within the confines of the harem. She's chatting with her maid, Unjong, reminding her to address her informally. As Unjong helps Seolha with her hair, she remarks on how much Seolha has grown. Seolha notes that she has been in the harem for nearly 10 years and is looking forward to the day she can leave. She's hopeful, but aware that the only way a concubine can leave is to become a nun, a fate she's unsure Unjong would share. After Unjong finishes her hair, Seolha wonders if her mother knew the scar would be the key to her survival in the harem. Unjong reassures her that she'll be free one day and that all she wants is to live in peace with her. Seolha vents about enduring the emperor's tyranny and the courtier's scorn, vowing to endure as best as she can. She hopes nothing happens the next time the emperor summons her. If her virtue remains intact, they can leave the harem once and for all. She dreams of going far away and never returning. Suddenly, they hear a commotion. Seolha mentions that Prince Muon must have returned from war. She asks if he is the one they call the demon, but Unjong warns her to speak carefully, as even the walls have ears. It's known that whenever the prince visits, death follows. Just then, a eunuch rushes in, calling Seolha's name and announcing that the emperor summons her. Seolha is left in shock at the news. As she arrives in the emperor's presence, he cuts her off mid-greeting. It turns out he summoned her just to mock her tainted face in front of the other concubines. This goes on for a bit until he suddenly remembers that she's expecting to leave the harem soon. He sarcastically suggests that perhaps another man could father her child since he's not interested. She thanks him for his words and says she wishes to join the service of Lord Buddha. Before she can finish her statement, he immediately rejects the idea and grabs her by the hair. While still holding her hair, he tells her he can't let her go because she brings him too much pleasure in his bedchamber. Seolha, however, remains determined in her plea to enter into monastic life. Just then, a servant interrupts, announcing that Prince Muon has arrived. Hearing this, the emperor throws her aside. Just as she's about to leave, he calls her back, saying he has changed his mind. He then directs her attention to the prince, revealing that he's his twin brother and the only man bold enough to breach his harem with soldiers. He mentions the rumors circulating about the prince and threatens to rip out the tongues of those who spread them. With his hand around her neck, he asks if she's scared, noticing her flinch. He then compliments her pleasant scent, thinking it contrasts with her face. As the prince calls out to him, he dismisses her. On her way out, Seolha walks past the prince and he courteously lets her pass first and notices the scar on her face. He remarks that the pain must have been unbearable, judging by the scar. He calls her brave and excuses himself to meet his brother. As Seolha heads back to her quarters, she reflects on the emperor's harsh words and the unexpectedly kind words from his twin brother, Prince Muon. As Seolha approaches her quarters, she notices Eunjong looking incredibly worried. Eunjong asks if everything is alright, but Seolha reassures her with a smile, saying there's nothing to worry about. Just then, Seolha starts talking about how she ran into Prince Muon earlier. She shares every word he said, which gave her the uncanny feeling that he's known her for a long time. As they chat, Seolha gently touches her face and asks Eunjong how her scar looks, wondering if it has faded at all. So Eunjong leans in close, examining the scar carefully before saying they should give it some more time. Suddenly, the door creaks open, and a familiar face peeks through. It's Hwoyoung, their friend, beaming with a big smile and carrying food. As they sit down to eat, Seolha pats Hwoyoung on the shoulder and tells him he can visit anytime, even without bringing gifts. She doesn't want him to get into trouble. Hwoyoung, who can't speak, gestures in response, and Seolha surprisingly understands and voices his thoughts perfectly, leaving Eunjong in awe. Just as Seolha is about to take a bite of the food, a loud voice yells, questioning why Hwoyoung would steal the emperor's gifts for her. Hwoyoung jumps up, trembling with fear. The voice belongs to one of the emperor's concubines, who bursts into the room, furious. Seolha immediately steps in to defend Hwoyoung, reminding the concubine that they are in her quarters. The concubine, still seething with anger, accuses Hwoyoung of stealing food and jewels from her quarters and bringing them to Seolha. Despite Seolha's protests that Hwoyoung would never do such a thing and was only being kind, the concubine cruelly stomps on Hwoyoung's head and orders the guards to take him away, threatening that he will lose his hands and be banished from the palace. As the guards move to take Hwoyoung, Seolha rushes forward, pleading with the concubine to show mercy. She even offers to take the punishment herself. The concubine whispers a reminder of a past event into Seolha's ear, but Seolha remains resolute, continuing to beg for Hwoyoung's life. Finally, the concubine agrees to reduce the punishment to 30 lashes. As the whipping begins, Seolha watches in horror as Hwoyoung collapses from the pain. Desperate to help, she rummages around frantically for anything that might save him. Then, she pulls out a knife, claiming she's the only one who can save him. Does she have some kind of hidden power? A long time ago, there was a curious maiden from the heavens who decided to come down to earth. One day, she stumbled upon a man who had been fatally stabbed. Feeling compassion for him, she cut her own flesh and gave him her blood to drink, because it had the power to heal any wound. This heavenly maiden's descendants were known as the Yul, and among them, only Seolha inherited her magical blood. After helping Hwoyoung, Eunjong takes a moment to tend to her own injury from cutting her flesh. She reflects on how Eunjong was the first human she had ever tried to heal. Before that, she had only healed wild animals, and it took her 3 whole days to recover. Even though Eunjong believes Seolha shouldn't be doing such risky things in the palace, Seolha feels she has no choice, especially considering the boy's poor family. As night falls, Seolha roams her quarters, lost in thought, when a voice from across the fence catches her attention. She looks over and sees a hand waving at her. Curiosity piqued, she goes closer to greet the man. They exchange pleasantries, and he tells her that he caught a rabbit and saved some for her. Despite the risk, he passes it to her through a small opening in the fence. They start chatting, but suddenly, Prince Muon appears behind the man. He coldly comments about an outsider whispering to the emperor's concubine in the night. Recognizing the prince's voice, Seolha quickly realizes the danger. To avoid getting the man into more trouble, she tries to sneak away. But just as she's escaping, the prince grabs her and lifts her back over the fence. He expresses his pleasure at seeing her again, but Seolha stays firm, insisting the man is innocent. She explains he's just a kind soul who helped a starving concubine. The prince, however, questions whether she understands the risks involved. As he steps closer, he remarks that she looks more haggard since they last met, but Seolha keeps pleading for mercy. The prince then asks her whom she's pleading for and advises her to beg for her own life instead of the man's. Only then, he says, will he consider letting the incident go. Seolha, suspecting he's as deceitful as his brother, the emperor, decides not to trust him. She resolves to turn the tables and blackmail Prince Muon. She threatens that if he harms the man, she will accuse him before the emperor of trying to defile her virtue and murdering the gamekeeper who tried to stop him. This would surely bring justice down on him for coveting the emperor's woman. Hearing her threat, the prince scoffs, admitting she might be the fiercest creature he has ever hunted. Seolha insists that if she's going to lose her life, she'll make sure he goes down with her. The prince doubts his brother will believe her, but Seolha stands her ground. She begins to cry, inwardly cursing the prince for toying with her and enjoying her distress. She recalls their first encounter and bitterly notes she shouldn't have expected anything better from him. Meanwhile, Prince Muon just watches her silently as she weeps uncontrollably. As he watches her cry, he finally gives in to her demands and orders his servant to give the man a stern warning and let him go. Seolha, still clutching the bag of meat, smiles and waves as the man walks away, but then she suddenly staggers. Out of nowhere, Prince Muon catches her and warns her that it's too early to let her guard down because he could change his mind at any moment. He hugs her, hoping it won't be seen as improper, but she quickly pulls away, telling him to let her go. He obliges with a smirk. She heads towards the fence, and the prince can't help but ask if she can manage to climb over it, considering he was the one who brought her there. She admits she can't and asks him to escort her to her quarters. To her surprise, he lifts her into his arms and carries her, despite her protests that there will be trouble if someone sees them like this. He reassures her that anyone who sees them won't live long enough to tell anyone. After a while, he bursts into her quarters, startling Unjong, who quickly bows, mistaking him for the emperor. Seolha bows to thank him and wish him goodnight, but then notices him tearing his clothing. Shocked, she looks away, pleading for him to leave and asking for forgiveness if she has offended him. Before she can say another word, the door bursts open again, and eunuchs enter with a tied-up deer. After dropping the animal, the prince instructs them to build a fire, then takes out a knife and slices the deer open. As if the scene isn't dramatic enough, he pours some of the deer's blood into a bowl and orders Seolha to drink it. He threatens to force it down her throat if she refuses. Reluctantly, she takes the bowl and drinks. The prince then reveals that in a recently conquered kingdom, it was customary for a man and his wife to share deer blood. Seolha retorts that this isn't one of his conquests, reminding him she's the emperor's concubine and demanding respect. She warns that the emperor will have her head if he finds out about this, and her blood will be on the prince's hands. She even threatens to haunt his dreams forever, but he laughs, teasing her about her sharp tongue and wondering how she survived so long with it. He then turns serious, suggesting she needs an ally in the palace and offers to be one. Surprised and deep in thought, Seolha wonders if their lives would have been different if she had managed to escape back then. Lost in her thoughts, Seolha is abruptly pulled back to reality when the eunuch informs the prince that the meat is ready. The prince wipes the blood stains from her hand, encouraging her to eat her fill. With no other option, Seolha urges Unjong to eat, despite her hesitation. Prince Muon hands Seolha a large piece of meat, and she starts eating voraciously. She even suggests saving some for the young boy, Hwoyong, who is unwell. The name strikes a chord with the prince, prompting him to ask more about Hwoyong. Seolha explains that Hwoyong is a eunuch boy recently assigned to her quarters. It turns out that one of the eunuchs who accompanied the prince is Hwoyong's brother, who had left for the war. The eunuch quickly rushes to Unjong's bedchamber to see his brother, who is still asleep from the treatment Seolha administered. He questions why his brother is lying there and reveals that his brother took the palace job for his sake, not expecting to find him in this condition. Seolha reassures him that his brother is just asleep and will be alright. But the young man leans in, demanding to know exactly what happened. Prince Muon calls him back to order, making him apologize to Seolha for his behavior. Out of goodwill, Seolha explains that Hwoyeon's previous mistress gave him a light beating, so she gave him a sleeping draft for healing, assuring that he will wake up soon. She also promises to inform Hwoyeon that his brother visited him once he wakes up. After Hwoyeon's brother thanks her, she reflects on the strangeness of fate. Prince Muon notices her deep in thought and asks if something is wrong. She admits she fears the emperor's wrath due to his presence, but he reassures her, reminding her of his promise to be an ally. She thanks him but reveals that her days in the palace are numbered, so she won't need an ally for much longer. However, he advises her to get used to his presence in the meantime, as she will need him. Later, Seolha finds herself in the emperor's chamber, where he contemplates her relationship with his twin brother, Prince Muon. Suddenly, he calls her over, pointing to an open seat beside him. It seems he's trying to spite his brother. As she takes a seat close to him, he keeps touching and brushing her face with his hands, claiming to truly cherish his concubines. He tells her that he had her outfit tailored to resemble the empress's regalia, but now thinks she would look better in courtesan attire. Ordering her to stand, he announces that since this banquet is for his generals who have excelled in battle, a special introduction is necessary. Then he shoves her forward and introduces her as the last of the Yul. One of the generals, surprised, comments that the Yul slaves in the imperial city all took their own lives after their people were decimated. They mock her for a while, and to Seolha's shock, the emperor kicks her down the stairs right in front of them. He coldly states that with the rest of her people gone, he has no choice but to keep her with him. This sight disturbs Prince Muon so much that he stands and walks towards Seolha, asking if she needs an ally. He lifts her from the ground, whispering that she shouldn't be afraid. Holding her, he bows to his brother, apologizing for touching his fair concubine, and also explains that he couldn't ignore a beautiful woman in distress. The emperor, seething with anger but hiding it, accepts this explanation, noting that since the banquet is in Prince Muon's honor, it's only fair things go his way. He then permits them to leave. Later, a servant tends to Seolha's injured leg, but suddenly, the door slams open, and the emperor enters, romancing another concubine. Seolha and the servant quickly bow to greet him. He orders the servant out, but, just as they are leaving, he commands Seolha to stay behind. As the intimate moment lingers, he urges the concubine to admire Seolha's face, claiming it's a beauty beyond compare. As if that isn't enough torture, he orders Seolha to look at him, insisting it's the only thing she's good for. She hesitates, which angers him further. He yells at her to look at him again, and this time she obeys quickly, tears rolling down her cheeks. A few moments later, he calls her a worthless girl and storms out of the room, leaving her with the concubine who's eager to give Seolha some unsolicited advice. Even after Seolha makes it clear she doesn't want to hear it, the concubine continues, saying that while the emperor may seem cold, it doesn't mean Seolha can't earn his favor. With that, the concubine leaves, shutting the door behind her. Worried about Eunjong's concern over her absence, Seolha hastily limps out of the room, tripping at the entrance, but luckily, Prince Muon is there to catch her before she hits the ground. He mentions that she hurt her ankle at the banquet and that he's been worried, so she thanks him for his help earlier. To her surprise, he comments that the emperor can't stand the thought of having her in his bed, yet there she is, covered in his scent. Defensively, she responds that the emperor can barely contain his disgust whenever he sees her face, and not everyone has a strong stomach like him, but the prince probes further, curious why the emperor keeps calling her to his bedchamber each night. Frustrated, she vents that she loathes it too, having suffered the emperor's torment since she came of age. Left with no choice, she must obey. She adds that the other ladies of the harem despise her for this, forcing her to live a lonely life due to her hideous scar, making her a pariah for something beyond her control. In the midst of her rant, Prince Muon holds her and licks her scar, showing it doesn't disgust him. In fact, he says he prefers that half of her face, claiming that the emperor and his concubines have no eye for true beauty. Hearing this, she slumps to the ground, remarking that the prince has no fear at all, especially in the imperial palace. He responds confidently, saying he fears nothing, whether in the palace or on the battlefield. The worst that could happen is losing one's head. A brief silence envelopes Seolha as she sits there staring at him, then a big smile spreads across her face. In another scene, the emperor can't seem to shake Seolha from his thoughts. Her presence lingers in his mind, even though he regards her as worthless, and despite his efforts, he can't cast her aside. As he broods, his brother enters the room, curious about what's vexing him. The emperor quickly turns and demands to know why he's there. The prince, with a mischievous smile, says he has an amusing story about the late emperor's will. He reveals that before the late emperor passed away, he sent him a letter, and now he wonders if his brother isn't curious about its contents. With a stern look, the emperor scoffs and says that seeing his brother reminds him of a certain concubine who is annoyingly similar. Stepping closer, he confesses that this concubine grates on his nerves, yet he can't stop thinking about her and he's unsure what to do with her. In a sly whisper, he asks his brother if he has any suggestions on what to do with her. Meanwhile, in Seolha's quarters, she sits with Eunjong, nibbling on some food. She recalls an encounter with Prince Muon, which oddly lightens her mood. Eunjong notices the change and comments on it. Their conversation is interrupted when the door creaks open, and Hwoyoung staggers in. Seolha rushes to him, concerned about his health, but to her surprise, he calls out, "My lady," amazed that he can speak again. She grabs his hands and tells him that she saved his life, but insists he must keep it a secret to avoid danger. Hwoyoung agrees and promises not to tell even his brother. Eunjong casually mentions that Seolha's powers seem to be growing stronger, but warns that their plan must proceed tonight. Seolha tries to dismiss the urgency, but Eunjong reveals that the next nightly visit has been scheduled in 3 days, leaving them no time to delay. With a heavy heart, Seolha suggests Hwoyoung spend time with his family tonight, trusting him to keep their secret. Later, as Seolha moves around her room, she reflects on a question that haunted her mother: was her power to heal everything but death a blessing for their people, or a curse? Eunjong's voice offers help, but Seolha declines, saying she's used to the pain. We learn, to our shock, that Seolha plans to re-inflict her scar that night. She burns her face with a hot object, reasoning that if the emperor discovers her ability now, he will never let her go. As she screams in agony, her thoughts drift to her mother and she realizes now that her ability is indeed a curse. It forces her to lose sight of her people's great sacrifice and makes her yearn for death instead. The next morning, Seolha sits in her quarters, soaking in the pleasant weather. Eunjong enters with a steaming cup of tea to help ease the pain from Seolha's scar. Gazing at Seolha, Eunjong can't help but hope for the day when the scar will finally fade away, but Seolha, with a reassuring smile, tells her not to worry because she's grown accustomed to it. Eunjong, still not entirely convinced, wishes Seolha would be a bit more selfish and stop sacrificing herself for others. In the midst of their heartfelt conversation, Hwoyoung bursts in, unable to contain his excitement. He drops a bag of sweets on the table with a loud thunk and announces that they are from his brother. As Seolha looks at the sweets, her mind drifts back to what Eunjong said earlier. She quickly snaps out of it and smiles warmly at the young boy. Eunjong notices the large quantity of sweets and raises an eyebrow, but Hwoyoung cheerfully assures her that they'll all be gone in 3 days since the long summer days give them plenty of time to enjoy the treats. He grabs a piece and starts munching, but Eunjong scolds him for eating before Seolha. She warns him to be more considerate, as not everyone is as forgiving as Seolha. With a gentle laugh, Seolha urges everyone to start eating and makes a toast to the long summer days. Seolha secretly wishes the summer sun would never set, so she wouldn't have to face the dreaded night when she must join the emperor. Yet, as always, the sun sets, and that night inevitably arrives. Her body is meticulously prepared, like an offering, before she is sent to the emperor's chamber. She enters the room, inwardly hoping the emperor will send her away quickly, but to her surprise, the emperor requests a lantern, which is unusual for him. She assumes this means he plans to send her away soon, as her scar is sufficient to dampen his desires. She fixes her gaze on the butterflies in the room, longing to return to her quarters. Then, a voice speaks, and she realizes it's not the emperor, but Prince Muon. To her shock, both twin brothers are present in the room.
Before this scene, Prince Muon and the Emperor are seated, talking over drinks. The Emperor expresses gratitude for the prince's efforts in maintaining peace in the imperial city. He mentions that some people think entering the Emperor's private quarters with soldiers should be punished. This troubles him, as he can't bring himself to punish his own brother, who was once seen as the ideal heir and still commands respect from generals, despite being cursed to wander battlefields. The Emperor feels obligated to protect his brother from punishment. The prince scoffs, saying this is why he's forever indebted to his brother. Even if he enters the Emperor's private quarters with soldiers or sleeps with one of the Emperor's women, his brother won't stop him. The Emperor responds that he has more women than he can manage and doesn't mind sharing some with his brother. He mentions having someone specific in mind, a girl that only the demon of war could handle. The Emperor needs this girl to bear a child but can't do it himself, so he asks his brother for help. In the present scene, Seolha stares at the prince, seemingly speechless. He asks if she fears for his life or hers. As he speaks, he removes her clothes and kisses her while the Emperor watches. Crying, she whispers that they will lose their lives. The prince acknowledges this but pulls her closer, turning her to face the Emperor. He whispers that they must survive together. The Emperor stands, asking what they're whispering about. Surprisingly, the prince tells Seolha to beg the Emperor for her life. He whispers words for her to repeat, which she does. This act seems to bring back memories for the Emperor. She continues pleading for mercy until the Emperor, annoyed, leaves the room. Before departing, he sternly reminds her that as his concubine, any child she bears will belong to the imperial family. He asserts that once the night is consummated, she will belong to him for the rest of her life. The next morning, she is lost in her thoughts, haunted by the Emperor's words. She is so absorbed in her musings that she doesn't notice Prince Muon entering the room. When she finally catches sight of him, she jumps out of bed, questioning his presence and urging him to leave immediately. However, Prince Muon remains calm, insisting that it's natural for a man to visit the woman he spent the night with. He steps closer, takes her hand, and asks if she didn't miss him at all, suggesting that she call him Muon. She is taken aback, thinking, how could a mere concubine do that? But Prince Muon tells her that it is a special privilege for her since they are now in the same predicament. She tries to deny any knowledge of what he is talking about, but he gently reminds her that he protected her virtue last night and even lied to the Emperor for her sake. He pulls her into a hug, his voice softening as he admits that he came because he was genuinely worried about her. Subsequently, Prince Muon reveals that his brother wants her child, an idea so absurd it brings her to tears. Seeing her distress, Prince Muon promises to find something to purge it should she ever become pregnant. Clinging to his promise, she wipes her tears. Taking her hand, Prince Muon remarks that he couldn't see her clearly last night because of the dim light. As he examines her hand, he notices a scar identical to one he has. He casually mentions that he's had it since birth and that people say the founding emperor and some of his descendants had the same mark. Fear grips Seolha as she suggests he should leave before the sun sets. Ignoring her plea, he lifts her up, saying they've crossed the point of no return and might as well enjoy their time together if their lives are doomed. Urging her to hold on tight, he sprints and leaps over the fence, revealing her to the setting sun. For a moment, she wishes she didn't have to return to the harem, a sentiment he wholeheartedly supports. With another leap, they arrive before a horse, already prepared for their escape. As they embark on their secret adventure, Prince Muon playfully suggests catching her a tiger or bear. She insists she has no taste for needless slaughter. He, however, remains adamant that it's not needless, pointing out that as an imperial concubine, she doesn't even have a pelt rug in her quarters. Once again, she firmly denies needing such things. Draping his cloth over her shoulders, he notes that her skin easily captures scents, including that of the man who held her last night. She blushes and shifts slightly away from him, but he pulls her back, cautioning her not to fall off the horse. He tells her to say the word if she wants to step down, though it would cut their outing short. To his surprise, she starts laughing, finding it amusing that they're sharing such banter when their lives are as good as over. As they venture deeper into the bush, Prince Muon dismounts and instructs Seolha to stay with Arung, assuring her the horse will keep other beasts away. When she wonders who Arung is, he explains that it's the name of his loyal horse, his steadfast companion on the battlefield. Seolha questions how he plans to hunt in the dark, and he replies that he prefers nighttime hunts because the calm winds make it easier to sense prey. Stroking her face gently, he promises to return soon and strides into the dark, leaving her in the stillness of the night. Left alone, Seolha is unnerved by the silence. Her mind drifts, and she briefly considers running away but quickly dismisses the idea, unable to abandon Unjang and Hoyoung. Suddenly, Arung begins stomping its feet, alarming her. Her confusion turns to terror when she sees a tiger emerging from the bushes. Arung, attempting to scare the tiger away, snorts and tumbles her to the ground, leaving her face to face with the growling beast. Tears stream down her cheeks as fear grips her. Just then, Prince Muon's voice echoes from the darkness, instructing her to move to her left. He shoots an arrow that hits the tiger in the eye, enraging the animal further. With no other option, the prince draws his sword and confronts the tiger. After a fierce battle, the tiger retreats back into the bush. Seolha rushes to Prince Muon, concerned for his safety. He quickly realizes that she is the one who is hurt, though she is too scared to notice. Before she can speak, he reaches for her face and kisses her passionately. They both fall to the ground, their connection deepening with each passing moment. Their romance blossoms amidst the chaos, growing stronger with each heartbeat. Still lying on the ground, Seolha mutters that the emperor must be mad to have left them alone together. She addresses Prince Muon as Your Highness again, and he gently reminds her to call him Muon instead. But how could she dare? He acknowledges her respect for him, but explains that he is merely a warhound who happens to share the emperor's blood. He adds that, like dogs, he eats, bites, and does as he pleases. Understanding that such freedom isn't a luxury afforded to her, Seolha begs him not to make her regret trusting him. She implores him to keep them safe, not just her, but everyone who serves her. With a steady gaze, he reassures her that if her only wish is to survive, it won't be difficult to achieve. Furthermore, Seolha adds that should the emperor come for their heads, she wants Prince Muon to protect hers until the very end. As he tries to initiate intimacy, she cautions him about the pain from the tainted half of her face, but he insists on its beauty. She tells him that others say she is hideous. He asks if that includes his brother, who recoils every time he looks at her scar. Putting that aside, Muon considers her a strange lady, remarking that she should be currying favor with the emperor to become his consort, not pleading for her life. She explains that such greed demands a price greater than she can afford. Curious, he asks who told her that, and she responds that it was her mother. With a gloomy face, she confesses her fear of becoming pregnant. Muon remains steadfast in his earlier promise, urging her not to worry. He adds that if she desires it, he can make her empress. He then urges her to rest, assuring her that he will take care of everything. Lifting her gently, he kisses her, reaffirming his promise to protect her. Later, Prince Muon is seen standing over the slain tiger, inquiring if Seolha is awake. A servant informs him that she is still sound asleep. Muon instructs the servant to ensure she is well cared for, mentioning that she is the one he has spent 10 years waiting for. As he stares at the tiger, he notes that the pelt was stained when he slit its throat and muses about catching another one at the next hunting tournament. After a while, Muon asks the servant about the Grand Preceptor and if there is any news. The servant replies that the preceptor has not yet returned, but with his wife confined to her sickbed, he should be back soon. Gazing skyward, Muon comments that the preceptor, a seer who claims to read the stars, remains blind to his own fate. Recalling the seer's past words, Muon orders the servant to fetch him before his patience runs out. He vents his frustration about the tiresome curse and his brother's endless provocations, feeling the weight of it all bearing down on him. Back at Seolha's quarters, Prince Muon instructs his servants to slice up the meat from the slain animal for her and warns them to ensure the pelt is not ruined. He turns to Seolha, promising to have a small cloak made for her. However, she glances at the animal on the ground and asks to speak with him privately. Once the servants leave, Muon asks what she wants to discuss. She reminds him that she has no taste for wasteful slaughter. He tries to convince her that it's for her well-being and that she needs to prioritize her safety and comfort. Despite his arguments, she insists she does not wish to see precious animal lives taken just to keep her fed and clothed. Even as he tries to make her see reason, she firmly warns him to stop hunting and killing for her sake. Muon, however, insists that he can't stop because it just wouldn't feel right. As she walks away, she tells him she's had enough of seeing animals sacrificed for her and that if he continues, he shouldn't come to her quarters anymore. In another scene, Prince Muon goes hunting with a servant who notices his unusual demeanor. The prince, who never misses a shot, has just missed one. The servant cautiously asks if something is amiss, but Prince Muon angrily responds that everything is fine. The servant suggests that he pay Seolha a visit, revealing that her quarters are in disrepair. The gate opens on its own in the middle of the night, the bathhouse ceiling has holes that let the warmth escape, and there is a 2-year-old wasp's nest in the eaves. Additionally, Hoyoung mentioned that Seolha has been searching for a yellow quilt since last year. Hearing all this, Prince Muon wonders how his servant Yang manages to understand his brother so well despite being mute. Yang explains that it isn't difficult, he simply focuses on what his brother would want instead of what he himself wants. Taking these words to heart, Prince Muon realizes there is much to prepare for Seolha. He orders Yang to arrange everything tonight in preparation for their visit to her quarters the next day. The next day, amid the bustling and chattering, the gate creaks open and Seolha steps out. She reminds the prince that she told him not to come by anymore, but before she can say another word, she is shocked to see all the improvements made to her quarters. The renovations, the new yellow quilt, everything leaves her overjoyed. She rushes to give Prince Muon a hug. Later, as they all dine together, Prince Muon is amazed to learn that Hoyoung prepared all the meals. Despite his surprise, he continues munching happily, appreciating the warm atmosphere and the sense of care that now fills Seolha's quarters. For Seolha, that day wasn't particularly remarkable. The wound on her face was still painful, and the food tasted as usual. It was a late summer's day like any other, yet she found her heart swelling with joy. The only difference was the presence of the man sitting beside her, the prince. With him at her side, she began to wonder if she might have a chance at happiness too. Later that day, after the prince had left, Seolha asks Eunjung if she thinks Prince Muon will be coming again, but before she can complete her statement, the sudden announcement of the emperor's presence pierces through the air. Startled by this surprise visit, she asks Eunjung if she has received any word of it, but she declines. Irrespective of the surprise, they both bow to greet the emperor and he mentions that Seolha may possibly be with a child so she shouldn't be kneeling so readily, then he instructs her to get up so that they'll talk in her bedchamber. This comes as another shocker to her, causing the emperor to ask if it is wrong for him to visit his own harem, but she responds by saying that she's simply concerned that they're not prepared to receive him. Amid her speech, he shuts her up, orders her to direct him to her quarters, and insists that no one is to enter. As she stands before him inside the room, he glances away and orders her to turn her face away because he can't stand the sight of it. Out of the blue, he questions if she did enjoy her little outing last night, and this question sends chills down her body, causing her to stutter. But the emperor continues, saying that since she is to bear his seed, it's only natural that she and the prince continue to dally together, deeming himself a most generous man. He explains that no other rule will condone a woman of the harem to mother the child of another man, even if he is the emperor's kin. His sly plot is that the public will know her as his concubine and the mother of his child, so she will never be able to set foot outside the imperial palace. Trembling, she pleads that she wants to live in the service of Lord Buddha for the rest of her life and she will never again trouble him with the sight of her face. However, the emperor asks for something in return if he guarantees her freedom. promises of a safe haven to call home. Being clothed in silk and fed feasts for the rest of her life are made provided she grants him his little favor. To her surprise, he starts by saying that his brother is an eyesore to him, and in fact, the bane of his reign, yet his hands are tied because the prince has the entire military force under his sway. Besides, a much-respected commander who boasts of 10 years' worth of victories on the battlefield cannot be ousted so easily, and it would throw the entire nation into disarray. Seemingly confused by his words, Seolha probes further, and just then, he reveals that he wants her to end the life of the prince. In addition, he says that if she gets caught in the act, she must keep her mouth shut or she'll forfeit the life of her beloved nursemaid. To him, this should be enough to strengthen her resolve. As if that was not enough, he decides to let her in on a not-so-little secret. Now, here's the shocker, it was Prince Muon who brought her to the harem. He explains that it was the prince himself who took her from her mother's arms and brought her to the harem. Naturally, that action raised some questions. Was it really a mass suicide that destroyed her people, or was it his butcher of a brother, who, feeling the sting of humiliation, slaughtered all the women in a murderous rage? Though she finds it hard to believe this revelation, she recalls her supposed first time meeting Prince Muon and his comment that day about her being brave. Thinking to herself, she says that if that day wasn't really their first encounter, he must have known all along how her scar came to be. Sobbing bitterly, she asks the emperor to give her his word to grant her and hers safe passage out of the palace once the prince loses his life. At that moment, he rummages through his attire and swears to bestow upon her a secret missive bearing his seal, and with it, she will be free to enter and exit the palace as she pleases. As he watches her weep, he ponders what face his brother will make once he learns that there is only betrayal there. He inwardly curses at Seolha, saying that he treats her with nothing but affection, yet she dares allow another man her virtue so readily, while she could have told him that she'd rather lose her life. On the other hand, she's lost in her musings, saying that once Prince Muon lies lifeless, it'll be the emperor's turn, so until then, he should enjoy what little time he has. Later that night, within the confines of her room, Seolha sits there sobbing her heart out. She recalls her outing that night with the prince and questions how he could seem so sweet if he slaughtered her mother and her people. Hearing her cry, Eunjong storms in inquiring what the problem is, and she asks her in return if her people really did take their own lives on that fateful day. She shares that she just heard the strangest thing, that the remaining Yul may have been massacred by Prince Muon. Amid her tears, she suggests that they leave the palace, noting that the emperor said he'd set them free if she ended the prince's life for him. Still, one question lingers, can she really do such a thing? The problem there is that the emperor will have their heads for sure if she refuses, so they have no choice but to run. Obviously, their plans are failed and they will no longer be able to leave the palace next year, so it's best they just run away. Subsequently, as they are both seated outside making plans for their departure, they decide to leave Hoyoung behind to save him from further danger. But amid all the mix of emotions, Seolha's mind keeps racing back to the words of Prince Muon. It dawns on her that those weren't the words of a loyal vassal. Perhaps he's also considering a rebellion. This makes her question what the bonds of brotherhood truly entail, considering that they are supposed to care for each other, but Eunjong replies saying that not everyone is capable of such sentiments, which is why she considers herself most fortunate to have met with Seolha. Then, Seolha apologizes to her for putting her in more danger when she should be protecting her instead. As the night gets thicker, Seolha retires to her room and lights up a candle, but she's unable to sleep as images keep flashing through her mind. Scared and gasping for air, she notices a figure, so she picks up the candle inquiring if there's anyone else there, but the figure grabs the candle and turns it off, asking who else would possibly come to her so late in the night. As she turns over, she realizes that it's Prince Muon, who informs her that he'd planned to visit briefly, but the sight of her bare skin bids him to prolong his stay. As he lays her down on the bed, she inwardly remarks that this is her chance to draw the blade and bury it in his neck. But before we know it, tears fill up her eyes as she reveals that she does not know what lies ahead, and she mentions that she's alone in a world filled with nothing but darkness and she's terrified it will stay that way forever. He reassures her that he's here with her in that darkness of hers while referring to her as my lady, which she promptly cautions him against, saying that she doesn't wish to be reminded of her position in the court. Then she requests that he calls her by her name. Hugging him, she mentions that she wants to go outside and she suggests they go to the forest again, but this time around, just the two of them. As they embark on their walk in the forest, Seolha discloses that she heard it was him who first brought her to the palace, and then she inquires if there's anything he can tell her concerning the demise of her mother and her people. He explains that since she had lost consciousness by then, she probably wouldn't remember. However, he doesn't know the details himself, and it was only after he brought her to the palace that he received news of their demise. In addition, all he can tell her is that even the Yul who were found outside the village had succumbed to their demise either by suicide or some other cause. Furthermore, he says that if any Yul survivor had been found and made a concubine, the emperor would have had her executed. This revelation brings back a memory of the moment the emperor spared her life. As their stroll continues, she declares that she takes no joy in the demise of others, though Prince Muon shares that he can't say the same because her life is the only one that matters to him. Engrossed in her thoughts, Seolha wonders if she can really trust the prince, but she waves it aside and requests that he teach her how to ride a horse. So, he begins lecturing her on the rules to use to ride a horse, referencing it to the way she writhed and moved her body with his on a passionate night they shared. This doesn't sit right with her and she yells, telling him to learn some courtly manners. Following this, he speaks to his horse, Arung, telling it that the person on its back is the one he cherishes the most, so it should take good care of her. Afterwards, she gradually begins riding it, following all the prince's instructions, but just when it seems to be going smoothly, Arung loses control, frightening her even further. At this point, the prince orders her to trust him and let go of the reins, but she hesitates due to fear. Eventually, she gives in by releasing it and the prince rushes to catch her. With a thud sound, they both tumble to the ground, but Seolha remains shielded in his arms. Wrapped in each other's arms, they share a kiss, and Seolha shares that her clothes have been soiled and she wants to wash up. With a smirk on the prince's face, he suggests they go wash up together. As they delve into the river to wash up, she reminisces on the journey that led them there and notes that their current situation doesn't feel appropriate. He embraces her, asking what doesn't feel appropriate while he rips off her clothes. The tension intensifies, building up to an intimate moment. But Seolha takes note of one thing. The moon can never triumph against the sun because its light is but a feeble ray before the sun's radiance, and to compare the emperor and his twin would be to compare a drop of rain to a thunderstorm. If only she could stop at this point, renounce her desires, and end the prince's life with her hands, maybe then she could persuade the emperor to spare her and Unjung. However, if she falls into the abyss all the same, it'll only be a moment's reprieve just until the time comes. The time seems to stretch as their intimate moment lingers. A while later, as they chill by the riverbank, Prince Muon calls out her name and asks if she has ever heard about the legend of her people and the tale of the heavenly maiden blessed with powers of restoration. She replies by saying that she has heard something of that sort from her mother and that they're descendants of an ancestor who had healing powers. The prince probes further, asking if she knows why the emperor is so desperate to have a Yul woman at his side. He then spills that there is a curse upon the imperial bloodline. We learn that a long time ago, a heavenly maiden happened upon a dying mortal. Pained at the sight, she fed him her blood and nursed him back to health. The man fell deeply in love with his savior and continued to feign illness to keep her by his side. He was of low birth and humble means, but his heart was pure. The heavenly maiden, who found herself sharing the man's affection, chose to remain in the human realm. She loved him dearly, and not many years later, they had a child of their own. Happiness, however, is a fleeting thing. While they wandered one fateful day, they found a man lying lifeless on the ground. The heavenly maiden rushed to the man, hesitant at first, but considering the amount of blood he had already lost, there was a need to treat him. Her husband was against the idea of helping the stranger upon discovering he was from the imperial palace. Just then, the man opened his eyes, gasping and begging for help, which she rendered to him. Subsequently, after the man regained consciousness, he questioned his location, wondering if he was still in Tiso. The heavenly maiden's husband didn't accommodate the idea of this strange man being in his house still, so they kept on exchanging words. When his wife even wanted to check up on the stranger, he kept on restricting her from going into the room, all in the name of protecting what's his. Amid their banter, the strange man who turned out to be the emperor threatened to make the husband pay with his life, but his wife immediately rushed in, begging for mercy upon her husband. With the emperor's eyes fixated on her, he grasped her hand and asked how she managed to bring him back from death's door. Recalling the incident in his subconscious state, he asked if it was her blood she fed him, but her husband tried to deny it by playing dumb. This did not sit well with the emperor. He roared in anger, questioning their audacity to try to deceive him when he saw everything for himself. He even went as far as accusing them of possibly trying to poison him, but while he was still yelling, their daughter came in to defend her parents. With her eyes filled with tears, she revealed that her mother was a maiden of the heavens and her blood contained the power to heal all wounds. She added that her parents were merely trying to save his life so he shouldn't hurt them. After a moment of staring, the emperor informed them that he would leave the next day and then tossed an object to the husband, instructing him to take it to the local magistrate and explain what had happened so that he would send guards to escort him back to the palace. With gentle steps, the emperor stepped closer to commend the maiden on her effort in raising her child. One day, while she went to serve his meal, she didn't find him in the room, but she got startled by his sudden emergence from her back. As he arrived, he informed her that he went hunting because she seemed rather ill-fed at a closer look, so he brought her something as a sign of his gratitude. Then, he inquired about her husband's whereabouts, noting that he did not expect him to leave her alone with him. Their conversation lasted for a while, with the emperor trying to covet the heavenly maiden. Despite all her warnings against his ill speech toward her husband, the emperor stopped at nothing to make sure he ruined the man's image before her, but due to the love and trust she had in her husband, she stepped away from the emperor holding fire in her hand and saying that if her husband truly loves her for who she is, he won't abandon her come what may. Tears stream down her cheeks as she screams that she's always had doubts about her husband too, but it's been 10 years since she descended to the mortal world, and maybe now, her heart has become human as well. Driven by a desperate need to end the worst kind of betrayal, she grabs the burning stick from the fire and presses it against her face. The emperor rushes forward, snatches it from her hand, and she collapses in pain, sobbing on the ground. Through her tears, she begs the emperor to make a promise. If she can prove her husband loves her for more than just her body, he must leave them in peace. But before he can respond, her husband suddenly appears. He hasn't seen her face yet, and as he steps closer, he casually says he came back to grab something he forgot. The moment she turns toward him, he recoils in shock. He tells her not to come any closer. She pleads, over and over, but he ignores her and starts hurling cruel words instead. In the middle of the chaos, their young daughter runs outside and clings to her mother, asking what happened. Turning to her father, the girl cries out that her mother is hurt and needs help. He doesn't move. Doesn't speak. Just watches. How could the heavenly maiden have known that seeing her worst fear come true would be even more painful than burning her own skin? Still crying, she gathers her daughter in her arms and rushes toward a nearby cliff, trying to soothe the frightened child. Unexpectedly, the emperor follows, swearing that her husband will be punished, but he still insists on taking her as his consort. She cuts him off with fury, blaming him for everything that has unfolded. Looking down at her child, she murmurs that she should never have saved the emperor's life. Step by step, she backs up to the cliff's edge. Before anyone can stop her, she falls. Her final words echo in the wind, that she never should have saved her husband. The emperor rushes to her side and finds her barely conscious. Desperate, he asks why she would try to take her own life. She answers weakly, saying she stayed in the human realm for love, but now sees it was all just an illusion she kept chasing. As he holds her in his arms, he pleads with her again, asking if she can still choose him. He admits that he never believed in love at first sight until he met her, and promises to take care of her, to feed and clothe her, if only she'll come with him. But she shakes her head, saying his words sound just like her husband's. He will be no different. He should let her go. Struggling to breathe, she whispers that she must return to where she came from, then takes her final breath. In grief, the emperor remembers how she once fed him her blood to save his life. He decides to try the same and searches frantically for something to cut his wrist. But even as his blood spills, it's not enough. She doesn't come back. Overcome with despair, he falls to his knees and begs the heavens. He prays, or curses, that she be cast into the cycle of reincarnation, so that he might find her again in another lifetime. The plea is answered, but not without consequences. From then on, across generations, princes born from the Tiso imperial bloodline begin to bear a deep scar on their wrists. Each one is cursed with an unrelenting thirst for blood that they must sate daily to avoid madness. When any of them ascends the throne, their rule brings famine and catastrophe. It becomes clear that the curse will only lift when the heavenly maiden returns. Now, having learned this history, Seolha sits quietly in her chambers, wondering, is this why Prince Muon hunts every night? She understands that he never had a choice, yet she still resents him. Harsh words echo in her thoughts. She even considers revealing her ability to him, but a troubling question stops her: what if he already knows? Her mind spins with doubt and unease, but what can she do? Her thoughts are interrupted by Eunjung and Hoyoung arriving with dinner. Noticing her distracted mood, Eunjung asks if something's wrong. Seolha waves it off with a smile and teasingly asks if Hoyoung cooked the meal again. The three of them chat and laugh lightly as they eat, until a sudden thud stops them. Yang has arrived. Everyone looks up in surprise as he bursts in. He stares at his brother, stunned by the sound of his voice. But the younger boy immediately begins to apologize for hiding the fact that he could speak all this time. His brother, however, is not so quick to forgive. Young keeps pressing for answers, visibly shaken by the revelation, which flusters Hoyoung. Noticing the tension, Seolha steps in and quickly takes the blame, explaining that she was the one who asked Hoyoung to keep his recovery a secret. Based on Yang's reaction, everyone assumes he's upset, but to their surprise, he suddenly pulls his younger brother into a tight embrace. Overcome with joy, he thanks the heavens for his brother's healing. With tears in his eyes, Hoyoung continues to apologize for not telling him sooner. Off to the side, Eunjung and Seolha quietly watch the scene, moved by the bond between the brothers, and silently sharing in that emotion too. Later on, Young turns to Seolha and bows in gratitude, thanking her for what she's done for his brother. But Seolha shakes her head and tells him that it's Hoyoung who has helped her through her loneliest days. She adds that while she may not share blood with him like Yang does, Hoyoung is just as precious to her. Seeing how everything has turned out, she decides to give the brothers the rest of the day to catch up. Before leaving, she gently asks Yang to keep what he's learned from Prince Muon for now. She wants to tell him herself when the time is right. Yang agrees, acknowledging the trust she has earned by performing what feels like a miracle for his brother. Still, he admits that keeping secrets from his prince feels like disloyalty and pleads with her not to delay too long. That night, Eunjung enters Seolha's room carrying the supplies for her scar treatment. She hesitates, saying it might be too soon, but Seolha insists this is the perfect time. Both Hoyoung and the prince are away, and she doesn't know when the chance will come again. As always, Eunjung offers to help, but Seolha declines. She's used to the pain by now. Left alone, Seolha sinks into her thoughts. She tells herself that if she can just escape the palace, the pain will finally end. She promises that she will unalive the prince and flee to a far-off place with Eunjung by her side. But a haunting question hangs over her: can she really go through with it? Her thoughts spiral. Her hands tremble. She lifts the tool to sear her skin again, only to freeze as the door creaks open. The prince stands there, eyes locked on her, asking in a low voice what she thinks she's doing. The tool clangs against the ground as he slams it down, his voice sharp as he brings up the origin of her scar. Alarmed, she quickly begins to explain it was never her intention to deceive him. She meant to tell the truth. But he cuts in, asking how long she's been silently enduring all this pain. Blaming himself for being completely unaware while the woman he loves suffered in silence, he calls himself a wretched man and pulls her into a tight embrace. Though he understands she had no choice, he vows to make those responsible pay with their lives, to finally free her from the torment. The two remain locked in each other's arms. Later that night, as they walk through the forest, he gently asks if she feels any better. She nods, then begins to confess. She reveals that she has the power to heal injuries, that her blood has healing properties, just like the blood of the heavenly maiden from the legends. At first, it could only heal animals, but as she grew older, her powers strengthened. Now, even the scar heals on its own, without her will. She adds that she used to reopen the wound only every 3 to 6 moons, but now, she must do it every month. Loving and remorseful, Prince Muon clasps her hand and scolds himself. He says he should have seen the signs, that he thought he understood everything, when in truth, he knew nothing of the pain she endured. Then, Seolha surprises him by saying his earlier words, about unaliving those who hurt her, actually made her happy. Even though she once told him to stop taking lives needlessly, hearing him say that made her feel seen, and she wonders if that makes her a cruel person. But the prince gently strokes her face and tells her that the real cruelty lies with those who hurt her. She has already endured more than enough. As they share this intimate moment, a rustling sound draws their attention. From the shadows, a bear and her cub appear. Prince Muon immediately offers to hunt the animal for her, but Seolha quickly stops him. She reminds him that she finds no joy in killing. And if he insists on doing it, he should kill the cub too, because it wouldn't survive without its mother. In the following scene, Prince Muon finally meets with the Grand Preceptor he has been waiting on. After a short exchange, the prince reveals that he needs a favor. Noting how similar the preceptor's calligraphy is to the late emperor's, he makes a shocking request. He wants the preceptor to draft a decree, one that mimics the handwriting of the deceased ruler. It becomes clear that the prince wants the preceptor to forge the decree, but the old man hesitates, warning him that anyone bearing the curse upon the throne will only bring famine and disaster to the land. Leaning in, the prince calmly asks whether any of that is truly different from what's happening now. He points to the current emperor, who spends his days chasing women instead of ruling, while corruption spreads through the court and enemy raiders press on their borders, all under the reign of someone supposedly untouched by the curse. Then, with a quiet confidence, he states that the curse will soon be lifted. This puzzles the preceptor, who asks for clarification, and the prince finally reveals that he has earned the favor of the heavenly maiden. With that revelation, he urges the old man to stand behind him and support his cause. Meanwhile, back in Seolha's quarters, she and her nursemaid Unjung admire the beautifully embroidered blanket the prince sent. Their admiration is cut short when he suddenly enters through the window. Unjung, sensing the prince intends to stay for a meal, quickly excuses herself to prepare the table. Alone with Seolha, he gently asks for her hand and slips a bracelet onto her wrist, one that resembles her mother's. Believing she holds tightly to her mother's memory, he thought the gift would bring her comfort. But he's surprised to find out that he was mistaken. Leaning closer, he softly admits that his goal was to ease her pain, but perhaps he's only added to it. Then he kisses her, smiling at his own lack of understanding when it comes to matters of the heart. As he removes her clothes and touches her gently, he remarks that this is a realm he understands better. Seolha responds with warmth, saying that nothing feels wrong as long as they're together. They sink deeper into each other's embrace, unconcerned even by the presence of Unjung outside the door. In the midst of their shared intimacy, Seolha realizes that everything else fades away, she sees only the prince. All other sounds vanish, and even the heat of the glaring sun feels distant. The moment stretches endlessly, like a dream with no end. Later that night, Seolha quietly knocks on Unjung's door, asking if she can sleep beside her. As they lie together, Seolha opens up, confessing her regret for falling in love with Prince Muon. She admits that part of her wishes he were only using her, pretending to care just to exploit her power, because if that were true, she believes her heart would be easier to protect. Elsewhere, Prince Muon is out hunting again with his faithful servant, Yang. As they move through the woods, Yang observes how well-rested the prince seems and notes that the signs of the curse no longer seem to weigh heavily on him. Curious, he cautiously asks if something has changed. The prince responds with a faint smile, saying he has Seolha to thank for that. Intrigued, Yang presses a little further, asking if the prince had known about Seolha's special ability from the start. In response, the prince begins to speak, admitting that none of this was what he expected. He once believed he understood everything that mattered, yet in truth, he knew nothing at all. Back then, he thought his only purpose was to save Seolha from his brother's grasp, and that alone would be enough. 15 years earlier, Prince Muon first laid eyes on Seolha during a tour of the provinces. A servant had led him to the Yul clan's settlement, explaining that the women of the Yul were often targets of abduction and so lived under imperial protection. While walking through the area, he saw a young girl crying, little Seolha, with her maid gently trying to soothe her. She was a strikingly beautiful child. When he returned to the palace, his brother, the emperor, eagerly approached him and asked if he had truly seen the last surviving Yul, and whether she was as beautiful as the rumors claimed. Prince Muon replied plainly that she was just a little girl. But the emperor was unmoved. With disturbing certainty, he declared that, no matter what, he would make her his concubine. Outraged but careful with his words, Prince Muon reminded his brother that he already had 5 consorts in his harem. The emperor, however, brushed it off. He said he wished to go down in history as the emperor who took a Yul woman as his consort. When Muon asked what would happen if the girl refused, his brother chillingly responded that if she defied the imperial decree, she would be executed. He added, almost casually, that it would be a pity to see the Yul bloodline wiped out, but she would be allowed to live only until she bore his children. What a merciless ruler he is! A memory suddenly flashes through his mind about a previous fire incident. In the heat of trying to escape the fire with 2 servants, he insisted on not letting go of his dagger which fell behind as they were running out. The female servant offered to go back to pick up the dagger but ended up getting consumed by the fire before she could make it out. Despite all her cry for help, the emperor just stood there watching her burn before the other male servant carried him out of the scene. In another scene, a young Prince Muon is deep in conversation with Seolha's mother. He informs her that her daughter is to be offered as a congratulatory gift to the emperor in celebration of his accession to the throne. He explains that his brother harbors an insatiable desire for beautiful women, and that their consent means little to him. With a heavy heart, Seolha's mother listens, the color draining from her face as the tales of the emperor's ruthless appetites finally strike close to home. Somberly, she asks the prince how the emperor's women fare in the imperial harem. Without hesitation, Prince Muon answers, they remain there until they're discarded either as broken women or corpses. After a moment of silence, he adds that he wishes to share a story with her. He begins to recount a memory from when he was 10 years old. That year, the late emperor gave him a folding screen, one that depicted a legendary tale from long ago. It told the story of the Yul clan and the ancient nation of Tiso. According to the legend, a maiden from the heavens descended to earth and married a human man, bearing him a child. But another man, an emperor, fell in love with the heavenly maiden at first sight. Naturally, the emperor sought to claim the heavenly maiden for himself and bring her to his palace. He whispered into her ears, insisting that her husband loved only her beauty, that he was drawn to nothing more than her pretty face. Powerless to defy the emperor outright, the maiden proposed a pact. She would test her husband's love by scarring her own face with something hideous. If he still loved her after that, the emperor must leave her alone. Believing in her husband's devotion, the heavenly maiden went through with it. She marred her once lovely face, trusting that his love ran deeper than appearances. But she was wrong. Her husband turned away from her, proving the emperor right. Heartbroken and abandoned by the man she once loved, the maiden fell into despair and ended her life. That part of the tale is widely known. But there's more to the story. Prince Muon tells Seolha's mother, something only that old folding screen revealed. He explains that, in truth, the emperor had tried to protect the heavenly maiden to the very end. Her disfigured face never mattered to him. By then, he had come to love her for who she truly was. After hearing the full story, Seolha's mother quietly responds. In her eyes, both the emperor and the maiden's husband share the blame. Their fixation on the maiden's beauty, she says, is what ultimately led her to such a tragic fate. But Prince Muon gently disagrees. He insists that the heavenly maiden was meant to be with the emperor all along, and that he would have cherished her, scarred or not. A silence lingers between them, until the prince finally speaks again. He says he could be that kind of emperor for Seolha, loving and loyal, if only she can endure life in the harem for 10 years. He urges Seolha's mother to understand that he is not like his brother. His desire for her daughter is not rooted in lust, but in something much deeper. He vows to protect Seolha from the emperor, but confesses that he cannot do it alone, he needs her help. Then, he reveals the truth, Seolha carries the blood of the Yul clan, and because of that, the emperor cannot simply discard or kill her. That bloodline gives her value and protection, if only she remains the last of her kind. As he speaks, Seolha's mother rises slowly and steps away, absorbing the weight of his words. She asks him, almost in disbelief, if what he's suggesting is that her daughter must become the last living Yul in order to survive, that only then will the emperor be forced to keep her alive. Then, with sorrowful curiosity, she asks if he means for her to scar her daughter's face, just like the heavenly maiden in the legend. Prince Muon meets her eyes and quietly confirms it. After a long pause, Seolha's mother makes her decision. She chooses to place her trust in Prince Muon's promise. Life as a Yul, she says, has been nothing but suffering. And now, she entrusts her daughter to his care. In the present, Prince Muon arrives at Seolha's quarters, only to be informed by Eunjung that she isn't in her bedchamber. Surprised, he asks where she is, and Eunjung explains that the lady spent the night in her own quarters. This makes the prince pause and question if something is wrong. Eunjung hesitates for a moment, then gently says that Seolha occasionally seeks her company on nights when her worries weigh heavily on her. His curiosity now piqued, Prince Muon presses further, asking what kind of worries she's been carrying. With a sigh, Eunjung begins to reveal the truth. She says that Seolha recently heard troubling rumors, claims that the prince was disgusted by the sight of her marred face. Worse still, the rumors suggest that her people were not driven to take their own lives but were slaughtered by him. Prince Muon's expression hardens as he scoffs in disbelief, demanding to know who would dare spread such falsehoods. But Eunjung immediately drops to her knees, pleading with him. She begs that if the rumors truly hold no truth, then he must speak with Seolha directly, because she's clearly upset. The more she grows to enjoy his presence and feel comforted by him, the more those rumors seem to haunt her. Still kneeling, Eunjung continues to beg for his understanding. After a moment, the prince orders her to stand. His voice softens as he agrees to talk to Seolha.